Welcome back to Miles Morales right here at Comicstorian, where we take your favorite trade paperback single issues and overall information of the Marvel and DC universe and break it down into videos helping you be a comic book expert. When we last left off, Miles Morales is trying to find his way in New York City, finding out how he can be a Spider-Man, but he was captured by unknown villains and they performed experiments on him for months. That video is down below, but now it's time to introduce some brand new villains and a brand new goal for Spider-Man Miles Morales. And don't forget, we stream frequently over at twitch.tv/comicstoriangaming, where you can find us playing the Avengers game, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, or whatever mood I'm in. We'd love it if you'd come and join us over there, and let's get into your comic books. As two individuals patrol the halls of ESU, one says, and then the dad's like, Johnny, Johnny! And the kid goes, yes, Papa? The coworker laughs and says that he can't get that out of his head. His daughter must have watched it 5,000 times. There's a loud crash, and they both grab their guns, running into a room where the crash came from, and in front of them is a large, hulking creature. One that if you've seen the Ultimate Universe or watched the Ultimate Spider-Man show, you may know. Because as both try to figure out what they're staring at, the creature slashes at them with its claws, and as their bodies fall, a voice calls out, "Excellent work, Norman Osborn. Now get what we came for and burn the rest." But that's a story we'll get back to. Because as the months passed by, Miles kept to himself after he escaped the experimentation, and he continued to write in his journal. A lot happened with the Assessor. A lot of weird dreams with him as someone else. Like it was him in another world, another universe. But since everything happened, he hasn't been able to put on the costume of Spider-Man. He sighs as he closes his journal for the day, and as he opens up his door, his parents scream, "Happy birthday!" Jeff hands over the balloons, and Miles looks at the one, and he asks, "Did I turn like 1 year old or something?" And Jeff tells him, "Yeah, the other one got a leak." Rio then pushes Miles and Jeff out, stating that they need to hurry up and get the cake. "Go! Vamonos!" Jeff salutes her, stating, "Yes, ma'am! Miles, let's walk." A short amount of time passes, and as they both return, Jeff goes back to helping. And Miles tries to tell them they don't need to bother with all of this. Jeff just tells them they're keeping things small. But he wouldn't count on his uncle. Aaron's kinda caught up in something. Miles realizes that is because of him. Aaron had to strike a deal in order to get Miles' location. At that moment, the doorbell rings and Genki comes in. But before anybody could sit down, there's a crash from upstairs. Miles hurries upstairs, wondering who it could be, and he sees Spider-Man Peter Parker jumping in the room. "Happy birthday, Spider-Man! Sorry about your desk." Miles asks, "You remembered?" And Peter tells him, "Of course! How old are you? Like 60? 70? Miles gives a forced laugh, telling him, "Haha, why don't you come down for some food? Meet the folks." Peter takes off his mask, telling him, "Actually, I can't. I came by to say happy birthday, but also tell you that a scientist and 2 security guards were killed at ESU last night before stealing loads of equipment. I was going to investigate, but then I remembered, hey, why would they need me here when there's already a Spider-Man in Brooklyn?" Miles tries to tell them that he hasn't worn the costume since, but Peter jumps back up, telling him, "I texted you the address. Sorry to do this on your birthday, but I got a jet, man." Miles tries again to tell him to wait, but before he could finish, Peter Parker's already gone. Miles lets out a long sigh, reaching into his closet, taking out the Spider-Man costume, and after a few minutes go by, he's in the streets. He swings around, telling himself that this actually feels kind of good. Getting the air on his face, getting the webs in his hand, nothing but sky beneath his feet. This is what he needed to get out of that slump. And as he reaches ESU, he crawls into the building and sees nothing. But at that moment, a deep, scratchy voice tells him, "Sneaky, sneaky, but I can smell you." Miles looks back to see where the voice came from, and right behind him is a giant hulking creature. Miles pauses for a moment, thinking, wait, something is wrong. This thing, I know it from somewhere. The creature charges into Miles, and the two come crashing out as Miles tries to web him down. The creature begins to pull the webbing off of his face, and as he can see again, he notices Miles flinging a car straight at him. The creature smiles, jumping through it to escape, but Miles webs onto him and slingshots himself, smashing a brick across the creature's face. The fighting continues throughout the city, but as Miles punches into him, he shouts, "I know who you are! You're the Green Goblin! We fought before! You were..." But before Miles can finish, Green Goblin grabs a hold of his head and smashes him into the ground. Miles kicks back, telling him, "Hey, I'm trying to think here." As the Goblin is thrown off into a construction site, he gets back up and focuses on one of the workers. He lunges at them, but just before the Green Goblin can land, Miles pulls the worker out, telling him, "Hey, this is between us." Now you're gonna give me some answers right now, or I'm going to, but at that moment, a giant foot stomps down on Miles, telling him, "You aren't gonna do anything. My name is Ultimatum. Yours doesn't matter because you're about to." At that moment, Ultimatum stops and tells him, "Wait, I know you. Just leave it be. There's a wrinkle here. I need to think through it." And Green Goblin asks, "What? Why don't we?" Ultimatum grabs a hold of the Green Goblin, telling him, "Because I said so, Norman. Don't forget who's in charge here." Miles tries to web onto both of them, but Ultimatum's boosters propel them further than Miles can reach. With nothing left, Miles gets back up to process what just happened. The big guy knew him, but who was he? Later that night, at City Hall, Kingpin says that he's elated to see him again. He's so very sorry that they weren't able to find what they were looking for, but just know that there's always a place here for them. Ultimatum says that he appreciated everything that's been done so far, but right now they need to live in the world that they were made for. Get back to the streets and run them how they used to. Kingpin tells him that he's certain that that is the path that they must walk, then so be it. Easy enough for him to turn a blind eye to an unlicensed entrepreneurship within reason. Ultimatum asks, "Wait, are you giving me Brooklyn?" And Kingpin tells him, "I'm not giving you anything. You've helped to build everything, and Kingpin is not a man who forgets that. Just don't expect me to call you Ultimatum, and I certainly won't insist upon Mr. Mayor." Ultimatum pulls off his mask, telling him, "Ultimatum is for scaring rivals. You're my best friend, Wilson. To you, I'll always be plain old Miles Morales." Bushwick, 1:30. Miles is taking on another group of thugs in red costumes. But the problem is, no one knows who these guys are, not even a guess as to who is filling in for Tombstone. However, the one thing that Miles does know is that these clowns are flooding Brooklyn with a new type of drug, which brings Miles to his next problem. Every time he fights these guys, they always destroy the goods before he could ever get a sample, and no one is talking. What's more, Miles' Uncle Aaron skipped town again. What he could really use is some advice right now. Things are continuing to get worse, but the next day at school, Genki tells Miles that they have finally reached the point that he's been warning him about. They're officially out of web fluid. Things couldn't get any worse, except they do. Just when Miles learns of this bad news, Vice Principal Dutcher pulls Miles into his office, telling him that they have an issue with Miles' attendance. Because of all of the excessive callouts, Miles is being put on academic probation. Any more no-shows and then they'll kick him out of school. So what's he supposed to do now? Stop being Spider-Man? Well, he can't do much without web fluid. So tonight's patrol is mostly going to be wall crawling, and that's when he hears somebody shouting, "Get your hands off me!" He quickly jumps over to the source, and looking down into the alleyway, he sees several of the red costume goons holding a man down, injecting him with their drug. Miles cloaks himself as he leaps in and starts to take them all down, asking, "Are you forcing this man to take your product? What's wrong with you all?" One of the men yells that Spider-Man is invisible, hit the lights and activate the goggles. Miles manages to hold his own for a while, but with so little web fluid, it means that he has to work twice as hard. Even though he has a splitting headache, Miles manages to release a full charge Venom Blast, knocking the group out. Once everyone is rounded up, Miles then asks, "Who are you working for? Ultimatum?" And says, "When did drug dealers force their product on the customers for free?" None of the men speak, so Miles sighs, stating that he's just gonna have to take some of it then. Before he could grab a sample, the man who was injected before roars with green eyes, tackling into Miles. Miles jumps over to the man, telling him that he doesn't know what's going on, but he really doesn't want to hurt him. The man tries to grab hold, but Miles throws the man to the ground, knocking him out. Miles then asks, "Okay, what is going on?" And one of the thugs says that the guy is in La La Land. He ain't gonna say nothing for about 12 hours. One of the other thugs tells that man to shut up and then says, "The boss will return from Peso Maritimo" in Spanish. Miles responds with, "Peso Maritimio, huh?" And then in Spanish says, "Didn't know Spider-Man speaks Spanish, did you?" With that lead, Miles takes a train to Manhattan and finds a man with several armed guards around him. At that moment, he gets a text from his father telling him that the baby is coming early and he needs to get home now. Miles sighs, realizing that his leads are all dead at the moment. But out of the corner of his eye, he sees a man with a gun trained on an important-looking man down below. He runs over to the attacker asking, "Didn't you know that New York abolished the death penalty?" But before he can land a hit, the man turns invisible, quickly throwing 3 knives, narrowly missing Miles. With Miles shouting, "Hey, you could've!" At that moment, the cloaking device fades and the man standing before him is Uncle Aaron in the Prowler costume. And that brings us to the conclusion of 10 and 11 of Miles Morales. Now, 10 was a 250th issue celebration of Miles Morales, so it was a little oversized. It also set up the new villains, Ultimatum and Green Goblin. But I didn't want to bring you a short single issue, so I gave us the little bridge gap, which basically reintroduces Prowler into the series. So we had the return of Ultimate Green Goblin, we had the return of Ultimatum, and we had the return of Prowler in these 2 issues. And now we're going to move into the storyline of which he's going to fight Ultimatum, and then he's going to fight Green Goblin. All of it seems to come together as one giant story, which is why we're going to end it here, because it's kind of like the Teen Titans story over at DC right now, where it's just kind of endlessly going with small stops in between each 2 or 3 issues. Not that that's a bad thing. But if you want Miles Morales, I'm putting it on Mondays with Miss Marvel right now until we catch you up on both of those series. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and check back next Monday to see if it's Miss Marvel or if it's Miles Morales. One of the 2 of them are going to come out. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to check us out at twitch.tv/comicstoriangaming. And you can also sign up for YouTube memberships here to get early access to these videos as we crank them out. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you next time right here.